The wind screamed through the valley like a wounded animal, shaking the windows of every house in Ridgemorn. Marcus Webb stood at his kitchen window, watching the snow fall so thick he could barely see his own barn 50 yards away. The weather report had warned everyone to stay inside, but Marcus knew better than most what these mountain storms could do. He'd lived here for 63 years, raised 3 children in this house, and buried his wife Sarah in the cemetery just beyond the ridge. Tonight, Christmas Eve, he was alone with his memories and the howling wind. His farmhouse sat at the edge of town, the last outpost before the road climbed into treacherous mountain passes. Most people avoided this route in winter, but there was always someone foolish enough or desperate enough to try. Marcus poured himself coffee, the 3rd cup since darkness fell, and settled into his worn armchair. The Christmas tree in the corner blinked with colored lights, a tradition Sarah had insisted on even in their hardest years. He'd kept it going for her, though it felt hollow now. The knock came at 9:30, so faint he almost missed it beneath the storm's roar. Marcus set down his mug and moved to the door, his joints protesting the sudden movement. When he pulled it open, the wind nearly tore it from his hands. A young man stood on his porch, barely visible through the swirling snow, his face red and raw from the cold. He couldn't have been more than 25, wearing a thin jacket that was never meant for this kind of weather. "Please," the young man shouted over the wind. "My car went off the road about a mile back. My wife, she's pregnant, she's in labor. I need help. I need a phone. I need something." His voice cracked with panic, eyes wild with fear. Marcus didn't hesitate. He grabbed his coat from the hook and his emergency kit from the closet. "Show me where," Marcus said, pulling on his boots. The young man, who gasped out his name as David, led him into the blinding storm. They trudged through snow already knee-deep, following the road's edge where David's footprints were rapidly disappearing. Marcus felt the cold biting through his clothes, felt his age in every step, but he pushed forward. Sarah would have done the same without question. They found the car nose down in a ditch, its hazard lights blinking weakly like a dying heartbeat. Through the frosted windows, Marcus could see a young woman in the passenger seat, her face twisted in pain. David yanked the door open, and the woman's cry pierced through the storm. "David, something's wrong. The baby's coming now. We can't wait." Marcus assessed the situation with the practiced calm of someone who delivered calves and foals in worse conditions. The car was freezing, the heater long dead, and the woman, whose name was Lisa, was shivering uncontrollably between contractions. "We can't stay here," Marcus said firmly. "The car's too cold, and if this snow keeps up, we'll be buried by morning. My place isn't far. Can you walk?" Lisa shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't. It hurts too much. The contractions are too close." Marcus made a decision. He pulled off his heavy coat and wrapped it around Lisa, then looked at David. "You take one side, I'll take the other. We're going to carry her." David's face showed doubt, but Marcus's steady gaze left no room for argument. Together, they lifted Lisa from the car. She was light, too light for someone 9 months pregnant, and Marcus worried about what that meant. They began the slow journey back to his house, each step a battle against the wind and snow. Lisa cried out with each contraction, the sound cutting through Marcus's heart. Halfway back, David stumbled and nearly fell, exhaustion overwhelming his young body. "I can't," he gasped. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can," Marcus said, his voice hard as iron. "You're about to be a father. Your wife needs you. Your child needs you. Now move." Something in Marcus's tone, the absolute authority of it, straightened David's spine. They pressed on, and when Marcus's house finally emerged from the white chaos, all 3 of them were sobbing with relief and cold and fear. Marcus kicked the door open and they stumbled inside, bringing a whirlwind of snow with them. Lisa was shaking violently, her lips blue, and Marcus knew they'd gotten her inside just in time. David helped lower her onto the couch while Marcus cranked up the heat and grabbed every blanket he could find. "Phone?" David gasped. "We need an ambulance." Marcus grabbed his landline and dialed. Nothing. He tried again, jiggling the receiver. Dead. The storm must have taken down the lines. He pulled out his cell phone, but the screen showed no signal, not a single bar. "The towers must be out," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Storm probably knocked them down." David's face went white. "What do we do?" "She needs a hospital. The baby needs a hospital." Lisa screamed again, her body arching with another contraction. Marcus knelt beside her, checking her pulse, feeling her forehead. She was burning up despite the hypothermia, and that wasn't a good sign. He'd seen enough difficult births on the farm to know when something was going wrong. "Listen to me," Marcus said, gripping David's shoulder. "I've delivered animals before, but I'm not a doctor. I don't know if I can do this safely. But I also know we can't get her to a hospital in this storm. The roads are impassable, and even if we could call for help, nothing's getting through tonight." He paused, letting the weight of their situation sink in. "I'll do everything I can, but you need to understand what we're facing." Lisa grabbed Marcus's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Please," she whispered. "Save my baby. Whatever happens to me, save my baby." The words hit Marcus like a fist to the chest. He thought of Sarah, of the complications during their youngest daughter's birth, of the fear that had gripped him then. He'd been helpless in that hospital room, but he wasn't helpless now. "Nobody's making that choice," Marcus said firmly. "We're going to get through this together, all of you." He turned to David. "In the kitchen, there's a pot under the sink. Fill it with water and put it on the stove to boil. Then bring me every clean towel you can find. Move quickly." While David rushed to follow orders, Marcus examined Lisa as carefully as he could. Her contractions were coming every few minutes now, intense and regular. The baby was coming whether they were ready or not. He sterilized his hands with rubbing alcohol from the emergency kit and tried to remember everything he'd learned from desperate situations on the farm and old medical books Sarah had kept around. But then Lisa's scream changed, became something primal and terrified. "Something's wrong," she gasped. "I can feel it. The baby's not moving right." Marcus checked again and his heart sank. The baby was breech, feet first. He'd handled this in animals before, but never in a human, and the risk of something going catastrophically wrong was enormous. "David," Marcus called out, and the young man appeared in the doorway, his arms full of towels. "I need you to listen very carefully. The baby's positioned wrong. I'm going to try to turn it, but if I can't, this delivery is going to be very dangerous for both Lisa and the child. Do you understand?" David's face crumpled, and he looked like he might collapse. "Do whatever you have to do," David said, his voice breaking. "Please, just help them." Marcus nodded and turned back to Lisa. He explained what he was going to try, his voice calm despite the terror he felt inside. Lisa nodded through her tears, trusting him with everything she had. Marcus worked carefully, his experienced hands trying to manipulate the baby into the right position. Lisa screamed, the pain excruciating, and David held her hands so tight his knuckles went white. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Sweat poured down Marcus's face despite the cold that still clung to all of them. Then, finally, he felt the baby shift. "Got it," he breathed. "The baby's turned. Lisa, you're going to have to push soon, but not yet. We need to time this right." He positioned towels and prepared for the delivery, his hands steadier than he felt. Outside, the storm continued to rage, isolating them completely from the rest of the world. In this moment, in this small farmhouse, they were all that existed. Lisa's next contraction came hard and fast. "Now," Marcus said. "Push now." Lisa bore down, her scream filling the house, and Marcus saw the crown of the baby's head. Again, he encouraged. "You're doing great. One more." But as Lisa pushed again, Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. The umbilical cord was wrapped around the baby's neck, and it was pulling tighter with each push. He had seconds to make a decision that would determine whether this child lived or died. Marcus's hands moved with a speed that surprised even him. He slipped his fingers carefully around the cord, feeling for slack, knowing he had one chance to get this right. "Stop pushing," he commanded, and Lisa obeyed despite every instinct screaming at her to continue. Marcus worked the cord, loosening it just enough to slip it over the baby's head. The relief was overwhelming, but they weren't safe yet. "Okay, one more big push," Marcus said, and Lisa gathered every ounce of strength she had left. The baby slid into Marcus's waiting hands, tiny and silent and terrifyingly still. Marcus's heart stopped. He'd seen this before in stillborn calves, the awful quiet when there should be noise. He quickly cleared the baby's airways, rubbed its back, and waited for what felt like forever. Then the baby gasped, and the most beautiful sound Marcus had ever heard filled the room. A cry, strong and healthy and full of life. "It's a girl," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion as he wrapped the infant in clean towels. "You have a daughter." He placed the tiny baby on Lisa's chest, and the young mother burst into tears, holding her child like she'd never let go. David collapsed beside them, sobbing with relief and joy and exhaustion. Marcus stepped back, giving them their moment, and felt his own tears finally break free. He thought of Sarah, wished desperately she could be here to see this miracle. But even as the family celebrated on his couch, Marcus noticed something wrong. The baby's breathing was too fast, too shallow. Her tiny lips were starting to turn blue. "Something's not right," Marcus said, moving back to check the infant. He listened to her chest, felt her pulse. His worst fears confirmed themselves. The baby's lungs weren't working properly, likely fluid that hadn't cleared, possibly something more serious. "She needs oxygen, real medical equipment. She needs a hospital now." "But you said the roads are impossible," David said, panic returning to his face. "You said nothing could get through." Marcus looked at the window, at the storm that showed no signs of stopping. He thought about the impossible situation, about this fragile life that had survived so much already but might not survive the night without help. "The roads are blocked," Marcus said slowly, an idea forming. "But there's another way. The old logging trail behind my property connects to the county road about 5 miles from the hospital. It's rough, barely maintained, but it's mostly downhill and the trees provide some cover from the wind." He paused, knowing how crazy this sounded. "I have a truck with chains on the tires and a plow blade. If we move now, we might make it." Lisa looked up at him, her face pale and drawn. "I can't travel. I'm bleeding too much." Marcus examined her and realized she was right. She needed medical attention too, but moving her in this condition could kill her. They were facing an impossible choice again, and this time there was no easy answer. "Then I'll take the baby," Marcus said. "David can stay with you, keep you warm and stable. I'll get your daughter to the hospital and send help back for you." The room fell silent except for the baby's labored breathing and the wind battering the house. David and Lisa looked at each other, having an entire conversation without words. "You don't even know us," David finally said. "We're strangers. You'd risk your life in this storm for our baby?" Marcus thought about that question, about why he was willing to do this insane thing. He thought about Sarah, about the community that had helped them through their hardest times, about the debt he owed to a world that had been kind to him more often than not. "On Christmas Eve 60 years ago, my father drove through a blizzard to get my mother to a hospital," Marcus said quietly. "A stranger let them shelter in his barn when their car broke down, gave them blankets and hot coffee, and then drove them the last 10 miles himself. My mother always said I was born in a barn, but I was alive because of it. Maybe that's why this feels right." He looked at the baby, so small and fragile in Lisa's arms. "Besides, it's Christmas Eve. If there's any night when miracles are supposed to happen, it's tonight. Your daughter was born in my house against all odds. Let me make sure she lives to celebrate her first Christmas." Lisa kissed her baby's forehead, then handed her to Marcus with trembling hands. Marcus bundled the infant against his chest, creating a cocoon of warmth with multiple layers of blankets. He gave David instructions on caring for Lisa, showed him where the medical supplies were, and made him promise to keep the fire going. Then he opened the door to face the storm again, knowing he might not make it back. The wind hit him like a physical force, nearly knocking him off his feet. He struggled to his truck, climbed inside, and carefully secured the baby in a makeshift nest of blankets on the passenger seat. The engine turned over grudgingly, and Marcus whispered a prayer to whatever might be listening. As he pulled away from his house, he looked back and saw David in the window, watching them go into the darkness. The truck's headlights barely penetrated the swirling white chaos ahead. Marcus engaged the four-wheel drive and felt the chains bite into the snow as he turned toward the old logging trail. The baby whimpered beside him, and he reached over to steady her bundle, keeping one hand on the wheel as the truck crawled forward. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, that this was suicide, but the sound of the infant's struggling breaths pushed him onward. The logging trail was worse than he remembered. Years of neglect had left it rutted and overgrown, and now buried under 3 feet of snow, it was barely distinguishable from the forest around it. Marcus relied on memory and instinct, following the ghost of a path he'd traveled countless times in his youth. The truck lurched and groaned, the plow blade scraping against hidden rocks and fallen branches. A mile in, the truck slid sideways, tires losing grip on a patch of ice beneath the snow. Marcus's heart leaped into his throat as they skidded toward a massive pine tree. He turned into the slide, years of winter driving experience taking over, and the truck straightened out just inches from disaster. The baby cried out at the jarring movement, and Marcus checked her quickly. She was still breathing, but barely, each tiny gasp a battle. "Stay with me, little one," Marcus said softly. "We're going to make it. I promise you, we're going to make it." He didn't know if he was trying to convince the baby or himself. The temperature inside the truck was dropping despite the heater running full blast. He could see his breath, could feel the cold seeping through the doors and windows. He wrapped more blankets around the infant, creating layer after layer of protection. The trail narrowed, forcing Marcus to navigate between trees that seemed to reach out with snow-laden branches. One wrong move would wedge them in permanently, and no one would find them until spring. The thought of dying out here didn't frighten Marcus as much as it should have. He'd lived a full life, had loved and been loved. But this baby, this tiny girl who hadn't even been named yet, deserved her chance at all of that. 2 miles in, the truck's engine began to sputter. Marcus felt his stomach drop as the power wavered. No, 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 he muttered, pressing the gas pedal gently, trying to coax the old vehicle forward. The sputtering smoothed out, then returned worse than before. Marcus realized what was happening. The extreme cold was affecting the fuel line, causing ice crystals to form. He had minutes before the engine died completely. He pushed harder, abandoning caution for speed. The truck bounced and crashed through the snow, the plow blade throwing up huge sprays of white. The baby's cries became weaker, more sporadic, and that terrified Marcus more than anything. He talked to her constantly now, telling her stories about his children, about Sarah, about Christmases past. His voice was the only thing keeping both of them focused. 3 miles in, the engine died. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the wind and the baby's faint breathing. Marcus tried the ignition again and again, but got nothing. He looked at the infant, saw her lips were definitely blue now, saw how still she'd become. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but he forced it down. Panic killed people in the wilderness. Clear thinking, that's what saved them. Marcus grabbed the baby, bundled himself in every spare piece of clothing and blanket in the truck, and stepped out into the storm. The cold was a living thing, attacking exposed skin with vicious intensity. He knew he was looking at hypothermia within the hour, frostbite much sooner than that. But according to his mental map, they were only about 2 miles from the county road now, and from there it was maybe 3 miles to the hospital. He began to walk, holding the baby against his chest, using his body as a shield against the wind. Each step was agony, his legs sinking deep into the snow, his lungs burning with frozen air. He fell twice in the first 100 yards, barely managing to protect the baby as he went down. The second time, he lay there for a moment, wondering if it would be easier to just rest, just close his eyes for a minute. Then the baby stirred against him, made a small sound that was barely audible. Marcus pushed himself up. "Not today," he growled. "I didn't come this far to quit now." He thought of his father, driving through that blizzard 60 years ago. He thought of the stranger who'd helped them, who'd given shelter when shelter meant everything. He was that stranger now, and he would not fail. The world became nothing but the next step, and the next, and the next. Marcus lost track of time, of distance, of everything except the need to keep moving. His face had gone numb, his fingers inside his gloves had lost all feeling. He couldn't tell if he was still on the trail or wandering in circles. The baby had stopped making noise, and that silence haunted every step. Then, through the snow, Marcus saw lights. At first, he thought it was a hallucination, his oxygen-starved brain conjuring what he desperately wanted to see. But the lights remained, growing brighter. The county road. He'd made it to the county road. He stumbled forward, emerging from the tree line, and saw the most beautiful sight of his life. A snowplow, its yellow lights flashing, working to keep the road clear. Marcus tried to shout, but his voice was gone. He waved one arm frantically while holding the baby with the other. The plow driver saw him, and the huge vehicle came to a stop. A man jumped out, running toward Marcus. "Good God, what are you doing out here?" the driver shouted. Marcus couldn't answer. He thrust the baby toward the man, and then his legs finally gave out. He fell to his knees in the snow, everything going dark around the edges. Marcus woke to warmth and light and the steady beep of machines. His eyes struggled to focus, and for a moment he thought he might be dead, that this was whatever came next. Then pain flooded through him, his frostbitten fingers and toes screaming as feeling returned, and he knew he was very much alive. A nurse appeared at his side, her face kind and concerned. "Easy, Mr. Webb," she said gently. "You're in Ridgemont County Hospital. You've been here for 6 hours. You had severe hypothermia and frostbite, but the doctor says you're going to be fine." Marcus tried to speak, but his throat was raw. The nurse held a cup of water to his lips, and he drank gratefully. "The baby," he finally croaked. "The little girl. Is she alive?" The nurse smiled, and Marcus felt a weight lift from his chest that he'd been carrying since the moment he'd stepped out of his truck. "She's alive. She's in the NICU, on oxygen and monitoring, but she's breathing on her own now. The doctors say if you'd arrived even 30 minutes later, it would have been too late. You saved her life. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling tears slip down his cheeks. And her mother? Lisa? The nurse's smile widened. The rescue team got to her about 2 hours after you arrived. She's recovering from blood loss and exhaustion, but she's going to be fine. She's with her baby now, and her husband hasn't left her side. For 2 days, Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, his body recovering from the ordeal. The doctors told him he'd lost the tips of 2 fingers to frostbite and would have permanent nerve damage in his feet, but he'd live. When he was finally strong enough to sit up and take visitors, David and Lisa came to his room, the baby wrapped in a pink hospital blanket in Lisa's arms. "We don't know how to thank you," Lisa said, tears streaming down her face. "You risked everything for us, for strangers. You gave us our daughter." Marcus looked at the baby, saw her pink cheeks and bright eyes, saw the healthy rise and fall of her tiny chest, and felt a joy he hadn't experienced in years. "Have you named her?" Marcus asked. David and Lisa looked at each other, then back at him. "We named her Sarah," Lisa said softly. "Sarah Hope. We found the pictures in your living room while we waited, saw the beautiful woman who must have been your wife. David told me about everything you said, about your father and the barn. We wanted to honor that, honor her, honor you." Marcus couldn't speak. He reached out with his bandaged hands, and Lisa carefully placed baby Sarah in his arms. The infant looked up at him with dark eyes that seemed far too wise for someone so new to the world. "Hello, Sarah," Marcus whispered. "You have a good name. A strong name. You wear it well." The story spread through Ridgemorn like wildfire. The local news picked it up, then the regional stations, then national outlets. Marcus's phone rang constantly with interview requests, but he refused them all. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because it was the right thing to do, because a stranger had once helped his family, because it was Christmas Eve and miracles were supposed to happen. On Christmas morning, Marcus was released from the hospital. David and Lisa wanted to drive him home, but he insisted on walking the 3 blocks to his house. His truck had been recovered from the logging trail, and though it needed repairs, it had gotten them far enough. As Marcus trudged through the snow, now melting in the morning sun, he saw something that made him stop in his tracks. His house was surrounded by people. Neighbors, friends, people he'd known for decades and some he'd never met. They'd cleared his driveway, fixed his front steps that had been sagging for months, and strung new Christmas lights across the porch. When they saw him approaching, they broke into applause, and Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment and pride. "You gave us something to believe in," his neighbor Tom said, shaking his hand carefully to avoid the bandages. "In a world that feels darker every day, you reminded us what it means to be human, to help each other." Marcus nodded, unable to find words adequate to express what this meant to him. Inside his house, he found it transformed. Someone had cleaned, restocked his refrigerator, and left dozens of cards and gifts under his Christmas tree. He sat in his armchair, the same one he'd been sitting in when David first knocked on his door, and looked around at the evidence of community and love that filled every corner. Sarah would have loved this, he thought. She would have cried happy tears and insisted on baking cookies for everyone. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus opened it to find David holding baby Sarah, with Lisa beside him. "We brought her to see the place where she was born," David said. "We wanted her to know this house, to remember it when she's old enough to understand." They came inside, and Marcus held the baby again, marveling at how much stronger she seemed already. "I've been thinking," Lisa said. "About what you said, about the stranger who helped your father. We want to do something, to pass it forward." She explained their idea. They would create a fund in Sarah's name to help families in medical emergencies, to pay for the unexpected costs that insurance didn't cover, to be there for people the way Marcus had been there for them. Marcus listened and felt something shifting inside him, a lightness he hadn't experienced since Sarah died. His wife had always said that grief wasn't meant to be the end of the story, that loss should transform into purpose. He'd been so buried in his loneliness that he'd forgotten how to see beyond it. This baby, this family, they'd given him a reason to keep going. As the sun set on Christmas Day, Marcus stood at his window watching the light fade over the snow-covered valley. The storm had passed, leaving everything clean and new. He thought about the chain of kindness that stretched back 60 years, from that stranger's barn to his own house, and now forward into whatever came next. He thought about how close they'd all come to tragedy, and how the thinnest thread of courage and determination had pulled them through. Baby Sarah Hope slept peacefully in her parents' arms in the room behind him. Outside, the first stars appeared in the clearing sky. Marcus raised his bandaged hand to the window, touching the cold glass, and whispered a thank you to Sarah, to his father, to the stranger who'd started it all. The barn door had opened when it needed to, and that had made all the difference. In the years that would follow, Marcus would tell this story countless times. He would watch baby Sarah grow, would be there for her first birthday and her first steps. The Sarah Hope Foundation would help hundreds of families, and the logging trail where Marcus nearly died would become known as Hope's Path, marked and maintained as a reminder of what happened that Christmas Eve. But in this moment, as the last light of Christmas Day faded and the world settled into peaceful darkness, Marcus simply stood at his window and felt grateful. Grateful to be alive, grateful for the chance to help, grateful for the reminder that even in the deepest winter, even in the worst storms, human kindness could light the way home. The barn door had opened, and through it had come not just shelter from the storm, but redemption, purpose, and hope for all the Christmases yet to come.